patient talk.
Right, so Pablo, first off, why do mental health issues appear at Christmas time?
So we've done a piece of research, and what we found was that about 3/4 of the Brits reported feeling stressed in the run-up to Christmas. Now, stress on its own is not an illness, but what we do know is that stress, especially if it reaches a certain level or if it goes on for a prolonged period of time, can lead into both mental health difficulties as well as physical health difficulties.
And what actually is stress, and how can we tell if we are stressed?
Okay, so from a sort of biological perspective, stress is a mechanism. It's almost a survival mechanism, and it takes us back to the whole fight and flight response. So there's a stressful event that happens, and suddenly the blood goes to, our muscles, our eyes dilate, we become more alert, we become more on guard, and you almost have to go back to sort of, caveman, as it were, who is suddenly confronted by a big mammoth or dinosaur. He sees this stressful event, becomes quite anxious, becomes very alert, and the stress response is there essentially to safeguard himself. It allows him to take himself away from the situation. And for short periods of time, that's clearly a good thing. The problem, however, becomes that if stress goes on for a prolonged period of time, then all these stress hormones start having a detrimental effect upon our body, both in terms of physical health, and that can lead to things like hypertension or sometimes dermatological problems and so on, but also in terms of mental health, where it can lead to anxiety disorders, depressive illnesses, and I suppose it's about having there's a breaking point in the stress mechanism. So whilst for a short bit of time stress is good, once it reaches that breaking point, then your health becomes negatively affected. Now, in terms of what to look out for from a sort of mental health perspective, how do we know that stress is having a negative effect upon our mental health? There's a couple of sort of early warning signs that you may wish to look out for. First of all, what we see is that people may become a little bit more irritable. And a lot of the time, it's the people around us who may pick up on that sort of first. You may also see that symptoms such as your sleep becomes negatively affected. It may take you longer to fall asleep. You may wake up more frequently in the night. You may wake up earlier in the morning. Appetite can be affected. You no longer enjoy your food as much as you used to. Concentration, you're no longer as able to focus on things. And then there's the general sort of anxiety feelings whereby you feel more tense, you feel more worried, you feel more on edge. So those are really the signs to look out for.
And what are the main mental illnesses and how are they treated?
Okay, so stress can essentially cause a number of different mental illnesses. The ones we often talk about are anxiety disorders, depressive illnesses, but it can also precipitate, it can also set off a pre-existing mental health condition. So if you have people who, for example, suffer from a bipolar affective disorder, which is also known as manic depression, that should be regarded as a chronic illness, but these people may well be well and stable for prolonged periods of time. But what you can see is that in periods of stress, their illness may flare up, as it were. They may become unwell again as part of the stress. Equally, you can see it with some of the psychotic illnesses such as schizophrenia, for example. And each of these illnesses, each of these mental illnesses, tend to manifest itself with slightly different symptoms. So that's where it becomes difficult to say, once stress takes you into mental ill health, what does it look like? And it kind of depends on what the illnesses are. But clearly, if it's an anxiety disorder, then again, it takes us back to these feelings of tension, worry, anxiety, feeling on edge. When we talk about depressive illnesses, what we found is that people their mood drops, they become more tearful, their self-esteem may be affected. And then there's also all the biological symptoms that we talked about earlier on, such as sleep disturbance, poor appetite, loss of concentration, and so forth.
And how can these be prevented?
So the important bit is, and taking us back to the sort of stress at Christmas time, is usually in day-to-day life, people are pretty good in having time to themselves to de-stress, to sort of decompress. And the way we often do that is by doing activities which are sort of, just for ourselves. And for some people, that may be going to the gym or going out for a walk, going out for a run. For other people, it may be having some quiet time to sit and read for half an hour, watch some television, listen to some music. So it can be different things for different people. The difficulty with the festive period is that people are so focused on getting all the arrangements for Christmas sorted, the dinner, making sure all the presents are bought for, and so forth, that actually our health no longer becomes a priority. So the first bit really to do is to make sure that despite having to undertake all these activities, that you still have that me time in the diary, as it were, to make sure that you can sort of de-stress. The other bit that's very important in the run-up to Christmas is people often feel that they have to take on all the activities themselves. Now, it's perfectly okay, of course, to share out some of these activities. And in fact, by sharing it, it can actually add to the sort of festive spirit.
So, Pablo, why do people get stressed over Christmas?
In the research that we conducted, there was essentially 4 big themes that kept coming up. One was the financial stress associated with buying the different presents. People also reported feeling very worried and anxious about buying the wrong presents for people. Then there was the stress associated with having to juggle different family commitments. And finally, people reported the pressure of making sure that everybody was having a good time on the big day.
Where can
If
people go
people
for
want
more
more
information?
information, then there's a lot of information and tips available on the Bupa website, and that's freely accessible for everyone. And for your listeners' information, the website is www.bupa.co.uk. There's also a number of other websites available that have good advice. Just to name a few, the Mind website is very good. The website of the Royal College of Psychiatrists have some specific patient advice on there, which again is of great benefit. Clearly, if people do feel that they are becoming affected by stress and they are developing some of these symptoms that we've talked about, then I would strongly advise for people to seek help from their GP at an early stage, because if left alone, these problems tend to get worse and the illness may become more difficult to manage, as it were.
Pablo, thank you for speaking to me. That's everything on my end, unless you have anything else you would like to add at all.
No, let me just wish yourself and your listeners a really good Christmas when the day arrives.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Have a good day, Pablo.
Thank you.